Morning, guys. Well, I'm up so early this morning, I thought I'd get my video out of the way early. I sort of lined it all up to go yesterday, but things overtook me, and I'm going to do it now. So I'm going to do a painting. I paint, and I decided to do a painting, and I like to paint the sky, but really into churches and spires and antiquitech, so I thought I'd sort of incorporate some architecture into like a sky painting, do like a bird's eye view and have it all misty and gargoyles. And so I was looking around and I found this church. I thought, wait, but the page it's on is called Earthquakes of the South of England. So I thought, this looks pretty interesting. And this is actually Chichester Cathedral. I mean, look at this thing. Look at this. Look at this. Chichester Cathedral is a high building constructed above an epicentre for South Coast earthquakes. So, well, this is interesting. Parts of it have collapsed on occasions. Look at this. I think this is called the Colchester Cross. Absolutely crazy stuff. Look at it. Anyway, talk about the earthquakes in southern England that are usually small events of 3 to 4 magnitude, but there are occasionally more severe quakes up to very strong, intensity 7. Chichester and affecting Brighton to Bridport. Right, okay, let's have a look. I'll show you on a map how Chichester looks in the UK. So it's not very big, but here's the UK, southern UK, and here's Chichester, and it's sort of West Sussex down Brighton, Hove way. So it's south coast to the east of the UK. And I tried to see what sort of importance the thing might have had. So lots of like Roman influence. It's got an amazing wall, an amazing wall. I wonder if they've got it on here. That doesn't look anything, but look at this thing. I mean, what is that? There's Chichester. It's a bit of a money place, I think. And there's, look at this. A lot of these cathedral cities are whoa. Anyway, it was built quite a long time ago. 11th century, 12th century. So this is admittedly an old pile. I'm trying to find a thing of the wall for you. Roman coinage. There's the wall. Look at it. It's red brick. Look at that. Roman? Well, I'll close that down. Go back to my earthquakes. Oh yeah, the Doomsday Book. The Doomsday Book, Chichester was mentioned in the Doomsday Book. And they had like a population of about 1,050 people, 1,500 people around the time the cathedral was built. Okay, right, earthquakes. So they've got a list. I do like a list. Now, okay, I say this in every video. I'm 64 and I've never experienced an earthquake in my lifetime in England, although there have been earthquakes in England because I've read about them on the news, you know, like blah 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 had a small tremor earthquake, but it's not something you associate with England. However, historically, there were loads. 1066, 1076, 1081, 1089, 1099, 1134, 11:34, October the 1st, middle of the night, a tsunami hit the coasts of England and the Netherlands. No land shock was felt. The sea rose suddenly with such violence as to inundate the country. 12:74, 12:75, possible Chichester epicentre Glastonbury Tor earthquake. Now, in fact, what was destroyed was St Michael's on the Mount, which is the name of the church on Glastonbury Tor. But putting an epicentre in Somerset is unlikely to be correct. Damage to the one very anomalous structure perched on a steep hill is not indicative that the earthquake source was nearby. Well, I don't know about that, because Rebel, for one, has made a correlation between these large buildings being upon hills and the mud event. Okay, 1426, 1551, 1580. Throughout England, especially at London, Dover and the whole of Kent, also in France at Boulogne, Calais, Paris, etc., Belgium, Brussels, Zealand and Holland, most violent in England. London environs, the earthquake lasted about a minute. 2 other lighter shocks were felt throughout Kent. At Sandwich, the sea was so agitated that the vessels in the harbour were dashed against one another. Portions of chimneys and buildings were thrown down in London. The Dover Straits earthquake, 1580. 1638, Chichester major earthquake, causing great damage and apparently releasing gases. An earthquake at Chichester in Sussex did great damage, accompanied by the smell of pitch and sulphur. The atmosphere was obscured as if by a cloud. And it says methane and hydrogen sulphide may have been released on a large scale from the extensive marshes and harbours of the Solent estuaries. This is probably the cause of the smell of pitch and sulphur and the cloud. It is well known that earthquakes can release methane from deep oceans. Good grief. 1666, Oxford, that's quite far away, London. Oxford, Belchington, Stanton, Coventry, Brill, at the same time in Hungary. 1671, 1683, earthquakes. Portsmouth major earthquake. Portsmouth, shock felt in the Isle of Wight. The Lisbon earthquake, right. 1755, the Great Earthquake of Lisbon. This earthquake, one of the most violent and widely extended recorded, produced sensible effects over a space of the Earth's surface included between Iceland in the north, Mogador in Morocco on the south, Toplitz in Bohemia on the east, and the West Indian Islands on the west. That is some earthquake. It lasted 10 minutes. Right. And we had a tsunami following it. Here it is. Look at that building. On the morning of the 1st of November 1755, one of Europe's most powerful earthquakes struck Lisbon. By the end of the week, 75,000 people in Lisbon had died, making the earthquake of 1755 one of the most deadly natural disasters the world has ever experienced. The devastation caused many Portuguese to question their religious beliefs, and the horrific event has shaped Lisbon's history ever since. So when it happened, it was like 9:30 in the morning, and everybody was at church because it was like the Catholic feast of All Saints. So I reckon all the bells had been ringing. Yeah. As part of the religious celebrations, every possible candle was lit, and the churches were decorated with flowers and flammable decorations. As the tremors rocked the churches, the candles tumbled and ignited the flowers. The fires ravaged Lisbon for 5 days after the earthquake. The strength was enough to bring down the solid stone walls of the Ribera Palace. The destruction included the cathedral, the Grigida, the Carmo, the Grand Library, the Royal Palace. The quake shocked Lisbon for a devastating 3.5 minutes. 2-metre wide cracks appeared in the streets, and people feared the end of the world. Tsunami struck Lisbon 45 minutes after the earthquake. Oh, it must have been awful. Thousands of people raced into the muddy river to claim the riches of the shipwrecks that had all sorts of stuff on. That might just be a little bit of legend. I don't think, you'd be looking to get jewels if it was running for your life. So I thought this was quite interesting. Even places that had escaped, like the earthquake, got burned down. Right. Afterwards, they all got together, and the Marquis of Pombal, the Prime Minister, said, "Bury the dead and heal the living." He overruled the church and prevented an epidemic of diseases by loading the dead onto damaged ships and burning the bodies out at sea. So that's one way of dealing with it, I suppose. And some of the other earthquakes that we've had in UK. Survivor of the 1884 earthquake. The most destructive earthquake known in Britain. 1884, guys. The most destructive earthquake known in Britain happened at 9:18 a.m. on April the 22nd, 1884 in Colchester. It was an ordinary, bright, sunlit morning. Same sort of time. The other one was 9:30. Then in a matter of seconds the townsfolk were terrorised and Colchester was brought to a standstill in a great cloud of dust. All around the district there was chaos, collapsed chimneys and roofs and wrecked buildings, including the little church at Burley. A rumbling sound moved quite distinctly through the ground like a low menacing growl, and everything began to shake violently. The ground heaved in the motion of a single wave. Buildings rose up, sank down and rose up again as the wave passed underneath. The earthquake only lasted 5 to 10 seconds or so, but in that brief time whole villages were wrecked and Colchester was reduced to chaos. Hundreds of chimney stacks crashed through roofs, tiles and slates cascaded to the ground. A real mess. Miraculously nobody was killed. In London, as in many places closer to the epicentre, the shock was fairly severe. The Houses of Parliament were violently shaken and a 3-foot wave engulfed boats in the Thames. Throughout most of the southeast of England and in places as far away as Portsmouth, Birmingham and Leicester, houses shook, windows rattled, furniture and crockery moved. So, yeah, man. London. London and earthquakes. Obviously, London is not a city one normally associates with earthquakes and seismic damage, but there is such a connection, and it is quite surprising. There are tales of the effects of earthquakes upon London and its inhabitants in at least a dozen cases before the 20th century. Other accounts may be hidden, and it is quite probable that other earthquakes were felt, but not written about, in surviving literature. A few events have occurred with epicentres that were likely to have been under London, but the majority come from the seismogenic areas of the United Kingdom, the Midlands and Lincolnshire, North Wales, Kent and the English Channel, into France and the Netherlands. An earthquake is known to have rocked London in December 1164, with no details. Another occurred 1247, 1269, 1290. These dates are spurious. A more substantial event took place in 1382, 1449, Croydon, 1551. One of the most discussed historical earthquakes was that one which occurred on Wednesday, the 6th of April, 1580. Lots happened in this one. There's a lot of localised flooding in London because there was a tsunami in the Thames, chimneys collapsed, and this is the one here. I think, hang on, it's 1580. This is 1751, the year of the earthquakes. Now, I like this one because it tells you about the sky phenomena as well, because there is quite often sky phenomena with earthquakes. It's a little poem. Still rose the morn, security had lulled, scattered sons of vice in false repose, heaven of its dread intent no portents gave, when instantaneous earth's huge cumbrous mass heaved with strange pang, and deep resounds for her groan. Oh, dearie me. So the night of January the 16th, 1750 was clear and calm. About 8 p.m, a not unfamiliar sight appeared in the north. A faint aurora sent up its beams for an hour or so before fading. Then about 9 p.m, an extraordinary phenomenon took place in the southern sky. A vast semicircular arch like a rainbow, but very much larger and a vivid red colour, sent up wavering streams almost to the zenith. It had been seen in the whole of the British Isles. Then on the evening of the January the 23rd, a fiery mass, described as an aurora borealis, moved very slowly from north to south directly over the city of Cork in Ireland, and was tinged with so deep a scarlet that it looked as if the city was in flames. Then a second fiery cloud, larger than the first, rose to the apex of the sky. Now the phenomenon was directly above Oxford, throwing out rays of multicoloured light. The onlookers acclaimed it as a most glorious appearance. And then, Thursday, February the 8th, first earthquake. People felt the chairs in which they sat shaking. Lawyers were alarmed. A slaughterhouse collapsed. A chimney fell. The Gentleman's Magazine told its readers there were 3 kinds of earthquake: the inclination, which was a vibration from side to side, the pulsation, up and down, and the tremor, when it shakes and quivers every way like a flame. Scholars were agreed that the origins of earthquakes were to be found in the underground voids which the earth was believed to be honeycombed. The earthquake, minor though it was, alarmed London. The last significant tremor to shake the capital had been 170 years earlier in 1580. Sights in the night. On February the 27th, the night sky was again strangely illuminated. An arc of light, wavering like flames issuing from fire. That was it's very modern for 1750. March the 8th, a month after the London earthquake. Another one. This shock was more violent. Sleepers were awakened by it. Somebody fell out of bed and broke her arm. So, despite the minor damage, Londoners were worried. One earthquake was remarkable, but 2 earthquakes in a month was unprecedented. Were they a warning from God? The second tremor had been more violent. Was it another warning, delivered with more force? Thomas Sherlock, the Bishop of London, was sure of it. Anyway, there's lots of swearing, and people said it was God's displeasure with swearing and unnatural lewdness. But, oh dear me, it says here a vast ball of fire was seen in the sky to the west of London. Let's talk about airquakes. Further shocks. Omens of disaster. People thronged out. The roads were thronged with vast numbers of people leaving the city. Everybody was panicking. Some went to Windsor or even further and waited in the fields or lay in boats all night. Many fashionable persons, racked by superstitious fears or their guilty conscience, waited in their coaches till dawn, expecting to hear more of the destruction of wicked London. But nothing happened. London remained unscathed and unshaken, but earthquakes continued, and strange sights in the sky. The streets on July the 11th, as if to offer the clergy a substitute for an earthquake, the streets of London were flooded in a violent storm of thunder, lightning. It all went to hell. And I leave all the links to these because everybody was anticipating divine wrath in 1750. Alright, yeah, come on, let's show you this. It shows you the extent. Now, this is quite interesting because we haven't had anybody being an expert on earthquakes in Britain. Whereas in Norway, they've been keeping records forever. Well, at least goes back to the 1870s. But in the UK, we've been pretty slow, and haven't really started looking at earthquakes until really the 1970s. Davison's catalogue of 1924 was 50 years out of date, so we were a bit slow on the old getting it together. Look at this map of earthquakes in the UK. Look at that. It's clear from this map that the spatial distribution of earthquakes is neither uniform nor random. It's earthquake damage at a church. I think a lot of the churches were damaged throughout the country. There have been earthquakes, liquefaction. Interesting, isn't it? So back to the old earthquake chart. 1757, 1758, 58, 58, 61, 61, 61, 1811, 8. This is all the English ones. All Chichester, Sussex, all around the same area. Portsmouth, Chichester, 1834. The inhabitants of the city were suddenly aroused from their sleep by an extraordinary noise. Beds began to shake, furniture move, bells ring. All were alarmed and dismayed. 1834, earthquake. 1834, 34, 35. This is worse than the comet one. Then nothing from 1889 and 1896 until 1963. And then 1970, no details. And then 2001. I mean, dear God. So a little earthquake. There was one in Portsmouth. These are the ones that I remember seeing about in the news, and that's it, pretty much. So since 1970 we've had 4 earthquakes, but before then they were quite sort of around. And this huge, great big machine church is plonked right on the top of an epicentre. Anyway, there's one more thing I wanted to show you. I closed the window down, unfortunately. I hope my voice hasn't gone funny. I hope it's in history. No. Right, I'm going to have to put this was found this morning. Big earthquake on Cascadia Fault could liquefy ground under Seattle.
In the meantime, while you can.
So he's saying that it could have an earthquake could actually liquefy the ground, and they do liquefy the ground. And I'm beginning to wonder if a lot of the mud flooding isn't as a result of earthquakes. But it's just another little theory, you know. All these dates, I mean, that little article I just read was just saying that a lot of the accounts may well be hidden. So the next thing I'm going to look at is London flooding. But I hope you enjoyed watching this, and it's just something else to sort of think about on our journey into trying to work out just exactly what happens. So thanks for watching.